I'm going to let you guess my body fat percentage in these clips and pictures. This was me a few months ago at around 185 pounds. Is it 8%? Is it 10%? Guys, this may surprise you, but I was actually a lot fatter in these clips than you may think. Keep watching because there's something I have to share today that has direct implications for your calisthenics training that I've never seen covered in this exact way before. It's no secret that calisthenics is a game of relative strength.
In order for me to do one-arm chin-ups or even, two one-arm chin-ups per arm, I had to have that body fat down like to 8% or less. Otherwise, it's just the relative strength isn't there.
If you're training for hypertrophy, then this doesn't actually matter a ton because, let's say you gain 20 pounds of fat, the pull-ups will be harder, but you're going to be able to do fewer of them. It's kind of like if you increase the weight in weight training and then you're able to do fewer reps. So it doesn't matter a ton for hypertrophy training, but if you want to learn skills, and come on, that's what all of us are here for, then you have to have a low body fat, which should be pretty obvious. Now, here's the huge bombshell no one seems to understand when it comes to body fat. Let's take me from a couple years ago. I'm 5 foot 8 inches or 173 centimeters, and I am 140 pounds or 64 kilograms. I wasn't muscular, but I wasn't super shredded either. My body fat may have been about 12%, so we'll just say it's 12% for convenience sake. Now here's me later on, sadly still at 5 foot 8, 173 centimeters in height, but I'm more like 185 pounds or 84 kilograms. Let's say that I'm still 12% body fat, which I think is a big stretch, but just for convenience sake, we're going to say 12% as well. So 12% in decimal form, that is 0.12, so 0.12 times 140 gives us 16.8 pounds or 7.6 kilograms of fat that I had on my frame in the before. Now let's do 0.12 times 185. This comes out to 22.2 pounds or 10 kilograms. You see why it's significant? My body fat stayed the same. I gained a lot of muscle, but I actually gained 6 pounds of fat. And mathematically, this is pretty obvious because if you keep the percentage the same, the body fat percentage, but you multiply it by a bigger number, then it's going to come out with a bigger number, which means you're actually gaining fat even though you probably didn't realize it because you probably actually look skinnier because you're putting on muscle. So as I'm trying to get at, muscle make you look leaner than you actually are. So this may seem impossible, but when you have more muscle on your frame, it causes you to display whatever fat you have in a much more aesthetically favorable way than if you're extremely skinny. Look at this insane clip right here. This powerlifter is extremely fat, but when he flexes, he still has visible abs.
Doesn't have abs? Well, let's see. Does Big Boy have abs? So many people think to have abs, you need 10 or 12% body fat.
Look, he got abs up in there, boy. What y'all talking about?
And not to be outdone by Cali Muscle, Big Boy lifts his shirt off to reveal a six-pack. He himself says, I'm overweight, I got a keg, lifts up the...
If you have muscular abs, they can flex through a lot more fat than you might think, which can really deceive you into thinking you're a lot leaner than you actually are.
The reality is lots of guys with over 20% body fat have abs.
Some people think, okay, well, I can see my abs if I flex, therefore I'm 12 or 10%. But this is just not the case at all. I mean, you just saw that powerlifter. He was probably 25 or 30% body fat. You can still see his abdominals when he flexes though. So the abdominal test is really not that good of a gauge of your body fat. You see what I'm getting at here? A lot of people are not as lean as they think, and it's really hijacking their calisthenics progress because they might have 10 or 15 pounds of fat they could lose that would really give them a boost in their progress, but it's just right under their nose. They didn't even know they had it because they think they're 10%, but they're actually 15%. Now, speaking of that, back to the clip from me from the beginning, I would say I'm probably 15% body fat or so. In every single one of those clips and pictures that I put on Instagram or YouTube at that higher body weight, I was careful to manipulate everything. The lighting was perfect. These pictures outside, I tried to angle myself perfectly with the sun, and then I was flexing my abs perfectly and maximally in every single one of those. If you saw some of those other pictures, and if I have some, I'll put them on screen, that I took during those same photo shoots, you would see that I actually looked a lot less impressive than you would think based on those prime perfect scenario pictures. And on top of that, because I gained a few pounds of fat, my fat storage genetics put some of that on my face. My face looked a lot rounder, a lot fatter at the time. And so every single picture I have on Instagram, I'm looking to the side because it kind of masks that. You can really see it as much. I'm not looking head on to the camera in any of them. So it just goes to show that it's a lot easier to think you're leaner than you actually are than you might think it is. So back to the math, 15% body fat at 185 pounds, that puts me at 27.8 pounds of fat or 12.6 kilograms of fat. In other words, I started at 16.8 pounds of fat a while back, and then I gained approximately 11 pounds over my bulking period, 11 pounds of fat, even though I thought that I was lean and, a lot more ripped than I actually was. 11 pounds of fat, that's significant. That would be like if I just gained the muscle but didn't gain the fat, and then I put on a 10 pound, 11 pound weight vest every time I went to train calisthenics. Guys, you do not want to have 10 pounds of extra fat on you. That can destroy your progress. Adding muscle adds strength capacity, and so it's always favorable in calisthenics to add muscle to your frame. I actually have this video right here where I basically say that before you even touch skills training, you should focus on hypertrophy training, get your musculature improved, and then you'll have a much better base to work on. You'll be able to progress in skills a lot faster if you go about it that way. This is why top rings gymnasts are both diced and they're buff at the same time. This is the ideal frame for calisthenics. You want to maximize your muscle, but you got to minimize your fat. You can't be bulked up. You just can't do it, guys. Don't do it. Now, if you want, you can go through a similar calculation to what I did to see how much fat you might have gained during your bulk up period. But I think this could be pretty insightful and helpful. Once again, the main idea is that even if you started at a reasonable body fat and then you bulk up and are actually still the same body fat percentage, you might look leaner, you might look more aesthetic, but you're going to have mathematically provable more body fat on your frame, which is just to your detriment when it comes to calisthenics, as I'm getting at. Put differently, the more you bulk up, the lower your body fat percentage would have to be to offset that, so that way you can keep your body fat pound, the absolute body fat you have, the exact same. I hope everything's made sense so far. We covered why a low body fat is advantageous in calisthenics. I think this should be pretty obvious, as well as how most people don't realize that they're actually gaining fat when they're gaining muscle. As a rule of thumb, if you went through an intense bulking period like I did, probably half the weight is muscle, and then the other half is probably both fat and water retention, because when you put on muscle, it's going to retain some water, and when you put on some fat, that's going to retain some water as well. So probably about half of that is muscle. Since I gained 45 pounds, this would mean 22.5 pounds of it was actual muscle, and that's why I'm trying to cut down to about 165 pounds, just kind of shred through all the fat that I gained and get down to a much leaner but also very muscular physique. And as far as reasonable weight goes, you just got to use intuition. For example, 185 pounds at 5'8", I mean, I knew deep down that could not all be muscle. I knew that I had a lot of fat, but because I was also kind of buff, it was more or less hidden. And then my abs, you know, we talked about the ab effect earlier. 185 pounds is not reasonable. That's why I'm trying to cut down a lot, because I knew I had a lot of hidden fat. To get your body fat lower, you have to be in a caloric deficit. I think everyone knows this. However, if you're like me, dieting is very hard because you're prone to overeating, binge eating. I struggled with this for the longest time, but I eventually overcame it. And thankfully, I have a huge log of notes on the exact strategies I tried, where I went wrong, when I would binge, how I overcame it, and how you can lower your body fat percentage so you don't end up like me, looking buff at 185 pounds, but with almost 10 pounds of new fat dragging me down, which made calisthenics training very difficult. The good news is I'm about to put out a video on how you can get your weight down in the most effective way for calisthenics. The thing is, we're not just going to cover fat loss. I have a lot of strategies for that. We're also going to cover water loss. We're going to cover de-bloating or getting rid of excess water retention. Weight is weight, unfunctional weight is unfunctional weight, and in calisthenics, you don't want more fat than you should have, but you also don't want excess water. There's little dietary mistakes people make, they often don't even know that they're mistakes, that'll cause them to retain an extra 5 or maybe even 10 pounds of water. And so this next video, I'm going to cover how you can avoid those mistakes, get rid of that excess weight, and once again, cut down your fat over time. Thank you for watching. If you found value, please return the favor by liking and commenting. My Instagram is the_captain_calisthenics. My DMs are always open. CaptainCalisthenics.com if you want to go look at my calisthenics hypertrophy course. That's it for today. Stay tuned. A lot of content coming. Captain Calisthenics out.